today on job search checklist. I want to go through just a couple housekeeping items. If you haven't noticed, I did go ahead and put a recording on, so this will be recorded and archived in our YouTube channel later this week. Additionally, I am going to have a live Q&A, so the chat function of Teams is not active currently. It's inactive. If you have questions that pop up or you have a question right now, I want you to go into the Q&A function and type in any questions you may have. We will have that live Q&A at the end. So again, please be sure to get your thoughts shared, and we will go ahead and review questions at the end. All right, let's discuss high level what to expect. When we think of a checklist, we need to have a plan. It's important for you to have an understanding of foundational aspects to put you on the course to success. We're going to help you navigate those steps and provide insight as to how to access resources to support the steps to success. And if there's no monitoring of progress, it's really hard to determine, how effective you are doing, where you're at with your plan. It's important to have a awareness of timeline as well. And then, like I mentioned before, we'll have that live Q&A at the end. Again, please insert any thoughts, questions you may have in the Q&A function. Again, the chat is not active, it's inactive at this time. As I mentioned before we really establish a checklist for your job search, we really need to have a foundation established, okay? We need to have an understanding of what is the industry that you are pursuing, whether it's healthcare, corporate America, accounting, financial. You need to have an understanding of trends that are happening specifically in that industry. Although it may seem obvious for some of the degree program offerings that we have, you need to be aware of the job titles that align with not only the degree, but the career that you are pursuing. And so it may seem obvious, for example, if you are pursuing a nursing degree, let's say, that you would be looking for specific nursing job titles, but there are various opportunities within healthcare as well as within insurance companies that aren't very basic RN, LPN, incorporating from case management to, again, like I mentioned, some insurance benefit type of opportunities as well. That's just one example, but I wanted to provide something that just demonstrates that even if it seems like you have a very specific target, there's going to be some opportunities to be aware of job titles here. You also need to know what types of certifications and licensures are going to be A, required, or B, preferred, and a way for you to differentiate yourself from, say, a similar candidate that may be applying for positions that you are as well. A second component is really understanding companies, who's hiring, and very specifically, personal to you, what is the geographic proximity that you want to find your employer pool? Maybe you have no problem relocating, so that could be, 1,000 miles. But I know that in conversations that I have often with our students and graduates, they're looking to stay within a very specific area. Even if they choose to relocate, they have a place in mind. And so it's important as we're considering the companies that are hiring, we're also considering where they are geographically located to you and how realistic that is. A third pillar here is understanding overall what a career pathway could look like. You need to have an understanding of what would be considered an entry-level position. So that doesn't mean that you may not have experience, but if you are changing careers, you are gaining a new degree, you need to understand what level is where you're most likely going to start. And then have a awareness of what the career growth opportunities may be. This ties a little bit in with the companies as it could vary dramatically. You may hit a glass ceiling much quickly at a smaller organization perhaps versus a larger one, but that can certainly be different regardless of size of organization. So things to consider here include that element. And then finally, job setting. Is this on site, remote, hybrid? I know in conversations I've had previously, the idea of remote is something that I would hear often. However, even with those remote opportunities, that employer geographic proximity is important because there still may be some requirements, whether it's a couple times a year or a period of time that's required to get training on site before you go into a remote type of setting. But it's important to consider the job setting, what you want specifically, and then total rewards. What I'm talking about here is compensation, benefits, paid time off, holidays, and any wellness programs that may be associated with that specific employer and that specific career. So these are things to consider as a foundation. Before we set the plan, you need to have some research and some fundamental understanding. And you also need to be aware as it relates to pay, what's a realistic pay expectation that I should have? That's often something that is incorporated even in an application. And it's important to provide a very thoughtful, researched amount that may be negotiable, but you can't just state negotiable or go too high or go too low. You want to consider your experiences and all of those components when we're having them, which is why I want to tie in how you can start doing that research. Our career services team has organized a very comprehensive uh, career resources guide that really is a hub of all of these interactive tools and resources and recommendations, specifically for those employer aspects as well as your company research. We have our helpful links that I'm highlighting here on this slide, specifically the Occupational Outlook handbook, which is pulling from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's a great way to gain insight on careers as in a variety of occupational profiles. And then ONET Online is a, again, subset of the Department of Labor. It's excellent to gain salary information because it all pulls from Bureau of Labor Statistics, have a fundamental understanding of what types of jobs are associated in those clusters, as well as a variety of other labor market data that you can ascertain from both of these tools. But as I mentioned, outside of that, from knowing, the types of employers that are applying, there's a bunch of resources right within this guide, and it continues to grow. We continue to add to it to provide you insights so you can get that foundation. Okay, so let's talk about the plan. Now, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a household where it was constantly, what's the plan? What are we going to do? So it's ingrained in me. And it's something that is really important for you all to apply to your job search. You need to have your resume, your cover letter, your professional references set. All right. You don't want to have just one resume and one cover letter, but you need to have a foundational document. And depending upon the positions you're applying for, You may also need to create a curriculum vitae instead of a resume. You may need a portfolio. Depending upon your program, there may be other elements that are required here. But make sure you have your job search documents in order. All right. Now, when we're talking about having a draft, you need to think of especially your resume, your CV, and your cover letter as a working document. You're going to adjust those based upon the positions you apply, but it's important to have a set draft to work from. Another component that is often neglected is really thinking about email, voicemail, and online presence. I'm going to do a deeper dive here with what I'm talking about. It's important that you have a specific email you're using for all of your applications. It's connected to your resume. All of your job search documents have to have the same one. And it's best practice, honestly, to have a separate email for your job search because you don't want to miss anything that's coming from an employer, right? I know in my personal email that I have, I get a ton of junk email every day. And you don't want an important communication from an employer missed. Now, the reason I wanted to stress here with email is we're starting to see a trend where outreach is starting through email. Now, that said, it's still important to have your voicemail set up, a professional message if you have one personalized, or your callback number is fine, and ensure that you can actually have someone leave you a voice message, although it's best, of course, when an employer calls to answer if you're not in a time and a position in a physical location that is going to warrant a thoughtful, prepared, professional conversation. It's okay to have it go to voicemail, but you want to make sure that they can actually leave a message. So be sure that you are staying on top of that as well. And then your online presence. It's important to have an online presence, but you need to be very thoughtful about it. What I'm referencing here is more than just your LinkedIn account. So you should have LinkedIn. So for those of you that may not be familiar with LinkedIn specifically, it is the social media account connected to your professional image. And it's important to have that because it's a great way to represent yourself as a professional, make connections and network, which we'll get to here in just a second, as well as, again, establish yourself as the professional that in the career path you're pursuing. Now, any other site, so Facebook, X, you want to make sure that you have your privacy settings. You want to be thoughtful about what you're posting, what has been posted. Google yourself. When we think of online presence, it's more than just my LinkedIn and Facebook. It's also what would someone find if they were to type my name? Because employers often are researching applicants. They're checking you out, and it's important that you have an online presence. Believe it or not, that's something that is considered. However, you want to make sure it's the professional presence that you want to have represented and ongoing. So this isn't just something that you do while you're applying. It needs to be something that you're thoughtful about throughout your career. A third component is the necessity of networking and joining or consider joining professional organizations to further build a relationship with a variety of colleagues and professionals that are in the career that you are pursuing and or currently in. Now, networking can sound very overwhelming for some, and it's hard to understand sometimes how to go about doing it. Essentially, it's establishing with the people that you know that you're actively looking for employment, that you are identifying connections to make, whether that's with employers through LinkedIn, for example, or in following various organizations, or establishing yourself with colleagues, people that are working within that industry. And so it's important that you are taking time and you are establishing a network here. And start with what you have, and believe it or not, you will be surprised through your faculty, your colleagues, current and prior employers that you have worked with, as well as students that you've interacted with, and graduates that you may know that already are part of that network, not to mention your family and friends. A fourth component that we need to think here is really how you want to present yourself to the employer during that interview process, but also through networking. So the elevator pitch is basically your sales pitch. It's your opportunity to really sell yourself, quite literally, and you want it to be an introduction that is relatively short and concise. So think of it as the time it would take to go from one floor to this next in an elevator, thus the name elevator pitch. Practice your interviewing as well. There are various ways to access questions that employers that you are going to be applying for, that are posted online that you can have access to through various resources like Glassdoor. Indeed has that as well. And then we have a variety of resources connected with interview practice, including Hiration, that allows you to actually record yourself answering industry specific questions and getting real feedback on how to improve your responses. And perhaps the most forgotten aspect here is the opportunity that you get to interview or ask questions to the employer. You want to make sure that you are considering positions you're applying for, the employer specific tied to that research that you have already done in that foundation, and make sure that you are listing out questions that you want to have answered for interviews that you're going to. It's important to think about how you present yourself with what you're wearing, as well as the type of interview that you may have. So let's start with professional dress. It's important that even if you are in, let's say, healthcare, that you're not going to go into an interview in scrubs. You're not going to go to an interview in pajama pants or Crocs. Although that may seem obvious, it's important to realize that people actually do. And so when you are going into a formal interview environment, you're going into a networking opportunity where you're going to meet with employers, you need to be thoughtful about what you're wearing and how it's going to be interpreted. And so it's best to always dress one level higher than the position that you would be pursuing. And it's important to think about the type of interview. Am I going to be in person? How much time is it going to take for me to physically get there? If I'm going to be driving or commuting through various public transportation, considering if it's virtual. Am I going to be on camera? What are my surroundings? Am I able to control the noise and present myself in the manner that with which I would like to, so that the concentration is on you as the professional? And then perhaps the most forgotten step and tool here is visualization. There are just a plethora of research out there that indicates if you visualize yourself achieving the goals that you're setting, and visualizing success in an interview and starting the career or continuing the career or growing in your career, that you're more likely to do it. It helps with goal setting, it helps with keeping you on track. Visualization is a powerful tool, and you can go about that in a lot of ways. Meditation is a form of visualization. You can also visualize through doing a vision chart. If you're a very visual person and you like images, you can do it in that manner. You can also do it through affirmation. I'm going to be successful in this interview, and saying it to yourself multiple times, whether it's aloud or in your mind. But those types of tactics are proven to be successful and help you lead to a successful job search process. All of this is great, but if you don't actually take action, it's a 100% guarantee that nothing's going to change. And so it's important that you are scheduling time to actually conduct your job search and that you are applying strategically. So you've done the research on the employers and you've identified specific companies. So are you religiously going and applying and actually hitting submit to those applications at said employers? And if there's a specific company that you want to work for, even if it's not the exact position, if it's a similar position, are you applying to that too? Think of applications as really the name of the game is getting to the interview and then selling yourself to that employer, right? And so you need to think about how you can apply strategically here. I already alluded to this before, but throughout your job search, throughout your career, however many twists that you may have, it's important to maintain a professional online presence. So setting those privacy settings and being responsible in the application process is great, but you have to continue through doing that. And you need to invest time in the LinkedIn aspect and building that network and following the employers and posting and sharing information and having those discussion posts. It's not just a one and done type of thing. It's a continuum. And you really ought to attend employer and networking events, whether they're virtual or in person. Even if it's specifically at an employer, there may be a virtual career fair, for example, something that this university, of course, hosts annually. We just recently did. It's important that you are attending these to build connections, find opportunities to apply, and present yourself as a professional. You'll become more comfortable the more often you do this, especially for those of you that are highly uncomfortable thinking about networking. And then staying on track. It's hard to remember every activity that you do and the frequency that you are doing it. If I'm directing you to take action and invest in your job search on a weekly basis, you need to have some way that you are organizing and keeping track of it. We have an example of it. I'll show you where to find it in just a moment, directly in that guide that I had shared previously. But there's a variety of other excellent job search trackers. I'm sharing a subsequent snip of one here that really allows you to track important information. What was the position? What was the employer? Who were the contacts, their phone numbers, their emails, providing the hyperlink to the posting. When did you apply? When did you follow up? How frequently have you followed up? Has there been any outreach directly from them? It's hard to remember all of that information, even if you are just applying to a couple places. But if you're actually doing your job search correctly and effectively, you're going to need to have some sort of documentation like this, even if it's pen on paper in this way, so that you are able to track and maintain your applications and stay on top of your job search. As I mentioned before, the application tracker that we have created is accessible right through that Rasmussen Career Resources Guide, through the job search tab, and then under the application tracker. And then you can see that there's a spreadsheet that you can download and access and use for your own. Now, we will continue to have a variety of Career Toolkit topics ongoing. We have another one coming up later this year, and then we will launch our new calendar of events for our upcoming year as well. But I want you to know that you really ought to be using that Rasmussen Guide Career Resources tool that serves as the hub of everything that we have to really help you navigate your own job search checklist. You can also follow our Rasmussen University Career Services page on Facebook so you can stay connected about any future events. We also provide a plethora of articles and resources that are real quick reads that can help you, again, navigate your job search, your career, give you some things to chew on so that you are aware of trends that are happening in your industry. And then, as I mentioned before, we're recording this webinar. We have our archived webinars as well as a variety of other videos accessible through our YouTube channel. And so these hyperlinks are great ways for you to get information to help you navigate your job search, your career, and stay on top of trends, which we will be sharing as a follow-up to this discussion. I'm going to go ahead and pause there and just take a peek because it's now at the time where we're going to go into Q&A. So again, if you haven't already, please insert any thoughts that you may have. I did have one that was shared first from someone that was unable to join our session, which ties to different career paths. So the question was, how would I pursue my job search based upon my program and or my career that I'm pursuing? And so there are going to be nuances that you should be aware of depending upon your individual program, such as I'll pull out just, if you're a design student or graduate, there may be the importance to have a portfolio of work that you can share. And there may be the necessity to have perhaps a website or something like that. I'm just providing an example here that may be different because of the industry that we're looking at. I mentioned also that you may need to have what's called a curriculum vitae or a CV. Depending on the industry and the level of position that you're applying for, it may be required to have a CV, which is a bit different than a resume. It's a little bit more comprehensive. And again, depending on either the position or the industry, that may be a requirement. And we have resources to support some of the nuances that may be within your specific program. Now, for programmatic specific support, you have perhaps the best group of people to reach out to, and that's your current or prior faculty. These are industry experts. We hire individuals that are working in the field of study so that they can provide insight as well as perhaps serve as a great way to reference you to a variety of opportunities. Another question that came up was, what is a realistic time commitment for an effective job search? And let's all be honest here. We're strapped for time. We have a lot of things that we're juggling. I know that our students, and graduates are often juggling work and family and other obligations on top of just the program that they're pursuing, which in and of itself is a lot. And so when we're thinking about a job search, it's important to invest in yourself and to think of things as, all right, realistically, I should probably spend approximately 2 hours a day, about 10 to 14 hours a week at a minimum, on all of my job search activities, from researching employers, updating my resume, applying, following up, the whole gamut. And so that's just a real high level suggestion. Again, thinking of it as this is an investment. You are looking to get to a new chapter. And so it requires some time and effective practices so that you get the results that you are looking to yield. All right. Another question that came through tied to applications. Is it typical right now for an individual to have 20 to 30 applications before landing interviews? And I'm going to tell you, it certainly does vary. What is more often is it typically takes 3 to 6 months to actually find a job and land it. And so it's important that, yes, it's a number game. We're going to tell you that on average, it is over 100 applications that are required before you usually land a position. But again, it can vary based upon your individual experience, um, the types of positions you're applying for, and all of those components. So I think that the best practice is not to get so stuck on a specific number. Rather, I think it's more appropriate to think of how long it's going to take, because you don't want to, again, just apply to, I mean, you can apply to 100 positions across the country, and that's not realistic if you're looking to stay geographically in an area. And so it's important to very much think of the strategy that you are pursuing, the specific type of career you're also pursuing. However, I can 100% guarantee you will not get an interview if you don't actually hit submit and apply. And so it's important that you are applying frequently in a strategic way. I hope that helps with that answer there. Just going to see if there's another one that came up. All right, follow-up protocol. I mentioned the importance of definitely staying on top of the follow-up through that application tracker. And it's also important to be thoughtful of how frequently we're following up, right? And so it's important to do a follow-up to an interview within 24 to 48 hours. And then from there, you have the opportunity to wait 1 to 2 weeks and then provide another follow-up. You need to provide an ample amount of time because there are often delays in the hiring process, and that also can be tied to the application. So you apply. If you don't hear anything, the status of the application has not changed in 1 to 2 weeks, it's appropriate to provide some type of follow-up, but be sure to read the application. There are some employers that will specifically list do not contact, and it's important to maintain that level of professionalism. And so it's important to fully review the specific application, but follow-up is appropriate, but you're not going to want to do more than 2 follow-ups after an interview, again, within that 1 to 2 week time frame with if you've not heard anything. And so patience is key here. I know that can be hard, but it's important to keep things warmly. So definitely doing that 1 to 2 follow-up within that appropriate time frame. However, you also need to be thoughtful and respectful to the employer that you are applying to. All right, I'm just going to see if anything else came through. All right, at this time, there has not been anything else that has been shared. I want to thank everyone who was able to join live. This will be archived in our YouTube channel, and I will provide a follow-up with the various links that you see on the screen. And we look forward to having you join a future Career Toolkit event. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day.